My name is Nora Ellison, and I was 34 years old when my husband's phone lit up beside the salad bowl and said, "Tell her you're working late again." I was setting the table for a Sunday dinner he had insisted was important. His mother was coming. His sister was coming. A family friend who handled private lending was coming with a folder Evan said would help us finally move forward. On the counter, beside the roasted chicken and the lemon tart I had made because his mother loved to criticize dessert, his phone flashed with a message from a woman named Paige. "Tell her you're working late again. After tonight, we can stop hiding." My husband, Evan, had told me that very morning that the dinner was about refinancing our house to secure a $178,000 home equity line for his new consulting business. He had not told me he was using my house, my credit, and my signature to fund a private office and apartment lease with the woman he was sleeping with. So I did not scream, I did not throw the phone, I did not call him at work. I took out one more plate, one more wine glass, one more linen napkin, and wrote a name card in my neatest handwriting. Paige. When Evan walked in, loosened his tie, and saw that empty chair waiting beside his mother, his face told me more truth than any confession could have. Before I tell you what happened at that dinner, welcome back to Hush and Tell Stories. If you have ever been asked to sign something before someone finished telling you the truth, this story is for you. Tell me in the comments whether you would have confronted him right away or let the documents speak. And subscribe if quiet proof is the kind of ending you understand. I grew up in Boise, Idaho, in a blue duplex near the river, with a mother who taught second grade, a father who repaired office printers, and a very ordinary understanding of love. In my childhood home, if a bill was late, it was discussed. If someone made a mistake, they apologized. If money was tight, we ate soup and talked about it like adults. There was no performance around suffering. No one turned financial stress into mystery. No one called secrecy protection. That sounds simple, unless you marry into a family, where every lie comes wrapped in manners. Evan Calder came from that kind of family. His mother, Diane, was a widow with perfect posture and a voice that could make an insult sound like advice. She lived in Meridian in a cream-colored house with silk curtains, a piano no one played, and framed photographs of Evan on almost every wall. Evan at graduation. Evan in his first suit. Evan receiving a sales award. Evan standing beside his late father in front of their old boat, both of them smiling like the world had already agreed to be generous. His younger sister, Mary's, had pictures too, but fewer. Diane loved Mary's, but Evan was her masterpiece. The son who would restore the Calder name after his father's bad investments, the charming one, the one who could talk a banker into a lower rate and a stranger into paying for dinner. When I met him, I thought charm was warmth. I was 26, working as a procurement analyst for the Boise School District, reviewing vendor contracts, purchase orders, bus maintenance bids, cafeteria supply invoices, and all the unglamorous paper that keeps buildings open and children fed. Evan was selling digital marketing packages to local businesses. He had a laugh that filled a room and a way of looking at me like my attention was the only thing he had been hoping to find. He liked that I was careful at first. "That brain of yours," he would say, tapping my forehead gently, "is going to save me from myself one day." I thought he meant he respected it. Later I learned some people admire your competence only until it refuses to serve their convenience. Our early years were good enough to make the later years confusing. That is the part people forget when they ask why someone stayed. Betrayal does not always walk in on the first date wearing a sign. Sometimes it arrives after mortgage paperwork, holiday photos, inside jokes, shared playlists, and the way he knows exactly how you take coffee. Evan could be tender. He remembered my mother's birthday. He drove across town once because I mentioned craving orange rolls from a bakery near his office. He sat with me when my father had gallbladder surgery and made the nurse laugh. When he was good, he made ordinary life feel like a clever secret we were building together. But there were always little gaps between his words and his records. He would say a client had not paid yet, but his bank alert said the deposit came through 3 days earlier. He would say he was working late, but the mileage on the car made no sense. He would say Diane needed help with a repair, and later I would find out she had asked for nothing. When I questioned those gaps, he smiled like I was cute. Nora, you audit lunch receipts for a L. Iving, try not to make our marriage a purchase order. I laughed the first few times. Then I stopped laughing. My job made me organized, but marriage made me ashamed of it. Evan and Diane were very good at turning my caution into coldness. Diane would say, a wife has to trust a man's vision. Maurice would say, Evan just thinks bigger than the rest of us. Evan would kiss my forehead and say, you are safest when you let me dream. Safe. That word did a lot of work in our house. When we bought our first home on Linden Street, I put down $62,000 from savings and an inheritance from my Aunt Lenora, a woman who had lived alone, paid cash, and told me never to confuse a romantic man with a reliable one. Evan contributed some, but less. That did not bother me at the time. Marriage is not a scoreboard when both people are telling the truth. The house was a 1940s brick cottage with a green front door, uneven floors, and a narrow dining room where the evening light came through lace curtains around 6 o'clock. I loved it the first time I saw it. Evan said it was too modest, but had future value. Diane called it charming in the tone she used for second-hand furniture. For 6 years, that house became proof that I could make a stable life even when the person beside me treated stability like a waiting room before something grander. I refinanced when rates dropped. I kept the insurance current. I managed the property taxes. I saved for a kitchen renovation one careful transfer at a time. The renovation fund mattered to me. It was not just cabinets. It was the kind of kitchen I used to imagine as a girl. Deep drawers, a pantry with sliding shelves, a window over the sink wide enough for basil plants, a long table where my mother could drink tea when she visited and my father could spread out a crossword, a room that said no one had to perform to be welcome. By the spring, everything fell apart. The renovation account had $93,400 in it. Evan called it trapped money. I called it planned money. That difference became our whole marriage. He had left his marketing job the previous year to start his own firm, Calder Lane Strategy. He said he wanted to help regional lifestyle brands tell bigger stories, which sounded impressive until I realized telling bigger stories required more money than he had and more discipline than he liked. I supported the idea at first. I built his budget spreadsheet. I helped him choose accounting software. I reviewed his client contracts for basic payment language because he hated details, and I understood how unpaid invoices turn into marital stress. For the first few months, he tried. Then he started working late, not occasionally, constantly. Tuesday client dinners, Thursday pitch decks, Saturday walkthroughs, last-minute calls, weekend strategy sessions with a hospitality group he would not name. He came home smelling like sandalwood and citrus, a scent neither of us owned. His shirts were cleaner than a man's shirts should be after 14-hour workdays. His phone began living face down. When I asked who he was with, he said, prospects. When I asked where, he said, downtown. When I asked why none of the money had shown up in the business account, he said, you have to spend before people take you seriously. I wanted to believe him. That may sound foolish, but belief is not always ignorance. Sometimes belief is fatigue. Sometimes you know the shelf is cracking, but you keep placing dishes gently because admitting it is breaking means deciding where everything goes when it falls. Diane made it worse. She came over one afternoon in May with a casserole I did not ask for, and looked around my kitchen like the old cabinets had personally embarrassed her. Evan says you are still holding onto the renovation money. I am saving it for the renovation. She smiled. Sweetheart, money sitting still is fear. No, sometimes money sitting still is a plan. Her smile faded a little. My son has talent. Men with talent need wives who understand risk. Men with talent also need invoices. That was the wrong thing to say. Diane placed the casserole on the counter and folded her hands around her purse. I know your family is very careful, Nora. There is nothing wrong with that. but careful people often mistake their limits for wisdom. There it was, the class insult wrapped in sympathy. My practical parents, my duplex childhood, my school district job, my spreadsheets. Limits. I looked at her and said, Evan's business can take a business loan if it has business income. She tilted her head. That is not how family works. I said, it is how debt works. She left soon after, and by that evening Evan was irritated. Did you really lecture my mother about debt? She lectured me about risk. She worries about me. She worries about access to money. He stared at me like I had slapped him. That is an ugly thing to say. It is an accurate thing to notice. He slept in the guest room that night. That became his new weapon, not shouting, withdrawal, cold, injured silence. He would make me feel like a banker refusing a loan to love itself. Then after a day or two, he would soften, bring flowers, and say, I just need to know you believe in me. I did believe in the man he could be when the lights were low, and nothing was due. But belief does not pay a home equity line. The first real warning came through the mail. A thick envelope from Redstone Community Bank, addressed to both of us. Inside was a preliminary home equity line packet for $178,000. I had not applied for it. Evan was in the shower when I opened it. The packet listed our home value, estimated payoff, proposed credit limit, appraisal fee, and a note that spousal signatures would be required at closing. The purpose field said business expansion and property improvements. Property improvements. That was the phrase that made my eyes narrow. It was broad enough to cover my kitchen and false enough to cover almost anything. When Evan came downstairs with damp hair, I had the packet spread out on the dining room table. What is this? He looked at it, then at me, then gave the easy laugh he used when trying to step over a hole. I was going to talk to you Sunday. Dinner with Mom and Mari's. Glenn Harrow is coming too. He works with Redstone sometimes. I thought he could explain options. Options I did not ask for. Nora. No, why is there a loan application on our house? His face changed just a little, the charm pulled back. Because we have equity doing nothing. We have equity because I put down $62,000 and because I have paid extra principal for years. We are married. Then you should have asked your wife before starting a loan application. I did not sign anything for you. That is the lowest possible standard. He dragged a hand through his hair. It is a pre-approval, that is all. Sunday is a conversation. With your mother, your sister, and a lender at my dining table. He looked toward the kitchen. I wanted support there because you get defensive. That sentence stayed in the room after he left it. Support. In Evan's family, support meant witnesses arranged against me before I arrived at my own opinion. I should have canceled the dinner. Instead, I did what I had always done. I collected paper. The packet went into a blue folder. I logged into our joint bank account and downloaded statements for the last 6 months. I opened the credit card account we both used for household expenses and filtered by merchant. That was when the picture sharpened. A charge at the Alder Room for $286 on a Tuesday. Evan said he ate at his desk. A boutique hotel downtown, one night, $349. A florist I had never used, $124. A women's clothing store, $680. Rideshare trips from downtown to a building on Grove Avenue after midnight. A transfer from our joint checking to Willow Street Holdings, $12,500. Another transfer, $8,000. Then a cashier's check request for $28,400, marked deposit. I sat at my desk in the little home office, the room where I had helped Evan design his business logo, and felt the old marital fog clear into something colder. I searched Willow Street Holdings. At first, nothing obvious. Then a state business registry result appeared. Willow Street Holdings LLC. Registered agent, Paige Lowry. Business address, 418 Grove Avenue, Suite 3B, Paige Lowry. I did not know the name yet, but my body did. You know how sometimes a name you have never heard lands like an answer? Not proof. Not yet, but an answer. I searched her public business page. She was an interior stylist and hospitality concept consultant. Her photos were warm and moody. Candles, linen curtains, brass lamps, smiling headshots. She specialized in intimate brand environments for boutique restaurants, private clubs, and residential retreats. On her Instagram, there was a photo of a hand holding a glass of red wine across a small table. A man's hand, only the wrist visible. Navy watchband. Evans watchband. The caption said, "Some projects feel like home before they even open." I took screenshots. Then I felt ashamed for taking screenshots. That is one of the strangest parts of betrayal. Even when you find proof, the training to be fair can make you feel like the intruder. I did not confront him that night. He came home at 10:17, kissed the top of my head, and said the downtown meeting ran late. I asked, "Good meeting?" He said, "Could be life-changing." I said, "I bet." He did not hear the edge because he had stopped listening for me. The next 2 days, air quiet on the surface. Inside, I was working. I requested a complete transaction history from Redstone Community Bank. Because I was co-owner on the checking and mortgage accounts, they could send me the loan inquiry summary and note that no HELOC could close without my signed consent. I asked the representative, a woman named Tania Bell, to place a note that I disputed any future electronic authorization and required in-person verification. She paused, then said, "That is wise if there is a concern." I asked her to repeat that. Not because I needed the bank to validate me. Because hearing someone neutral call caution, wise after years of being called cold, did something to my spine. I emailed our insurance agent and asked for copies of homeowners' policy declarations. I pulled the deed from the Ada County Recorder's website. Both names were on it. I opened my Aunt Lenora's estate file and found the bank transfer showing my inheritance used for the down payment. Then I called a divorce attorney. Her name was Claudia Nance, and she was recommended by a woman in my office who had survived a husband with a gambling app and a talent for crying. Claudia's office was above a bakery downtown, which felt too warm for the kind of conversation we had. I brought the blue folder. She read quietly. Good attorneys are not impressed by drama. They are impressed by dates. After 20 minutes, she looked up and said, "Do not sign the HELOC." I was not planning to. Good, do not move money out of joint accounts except for normal living expenses without advice. Do not confront him alone if you believe he will destroy documents. Preserve everything. Forward copies to an email he cannot access. He has been using joint funds, yes. Can I stop it? You can take steps. We can file for temporary orders if you proceed with divorce. We can also notify the bank in writing that you do not consent to new encumbrances. In divorce, spending marital funds on an affair or separate venture can matter. It is not magic, but it matters. Magic. That was the word I needed to hear refused. I did not want a movie ending. I wanted a real one. I asked, "What do I do about Sunday?" Claudia studied me. "What is Sunday?" "A dinner where he plans to bring his mother, his sister, and a lending friend to pressure me into signing." "Do you want to cancel it?" I thought about Evan's phone face down, Diane's careful insults, the loan packet, the chair at my dining table where everyone would expect me to defend my refusal while knowing only part of the truth. "No," I said, "I want witnesses." Claudia nodded once. "Then listen more than you speak. Do not agree to anything. Do not let anyone rush you. And if someone says you are being emotional, ask them which document they want to discuss." I wrote that down. Sunday arrived with a bright, clean sky that made the whole day feel less sinister than it was. I cleaned the house slowly, not because Diane deserved a clean house, because I needed my hands to do something with the dread. I roasted chicken with thyme and lemon. I made green beans with almonds. I set out rolls, salad, and the lemon tart. The dining room looked lovely in the late afternoon light, and that made me sad. I had set that table hundreds of times believing it meant home. At 5:42, Evan came downstairs wearing a navy shirt and the expensive watch he claimed was a client gift. His phone was in his hand. He looked nervous but polished, the way he looked before presentations. "Thank you for doing this," he said, "for dinner, for being open." I looked at him. "I am listening." He smiled like that was close enough. His mother arrived first, carrying flowers I knew she had bought on clearance because the stems were browning under the ribbon. Mary's arrived after her, wearing a camel coat and the expression of a younger sister who had been briefed to pity me. Glenn Harrow came at 6 on the dot. He was a square-faced man in his 50s who smelled like aftershave and file cabinets. He carried a leather folder and called me Mrs. Calder even though I had never changed my last name. "Ellison," I said. He blinked. "Excuse me." "My last name is Ellison." Evan's jaw moved. Diane smiled. "Nora kept her name. Modern girls enjoy paperwork." I said, "Some of us enjoy accuracy." That was the first quiet crack. At 6:14, while everyone stood in the living room with wine they did not need, Evan's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter beside the salad bowl. I was closest. I did not pick it up. I did not unlock it. The screen lit by itself. "Paige, tell her you're working late again. After tonight, we can stop hiding." There are moments when the mind becomes very still. I had suspected, I had collected, I had prepared. But seeing that sentence on the counter, where I had just cut lemons, made the betrayal ordinary in a way that hurt more than spectacle could have. Not in a hotel. Not in a dramatic confro. Entation. Just there, between salad and silverware, while his mother discussed interest rates in my living room. I looked at the phone until the screen went dark. Then I opened the sideboard drawer and took out an extra place setting. White plate, salad plate, fork, knife, spoon, wine glass, linen napkin. I placed it at the table between Evan and Glenn Harrow. Then I took one of the small cream place cards I used at Thanksgiving and wrote one word: Paige. My handwriting did not shake. That surprised me. When Evan came into the dining room to tell me Glenn was ready to walk us through the structure, he stopped so abruptly Diane nearly bumped into him. His eyes moved from the plate to the name card, then to me. "What is this?" he asked. "Dinner." Mary's leaned around him. "Oh," Diane stepped closer. Her face remained composed, but the tendons in her neck changed. "Nora, what are you doing?" I placed the salad bowl on the table. Setting a place for the person Evan's phone said I wasn't supposed to know about. Glenn Harrow looked at Evan. Evan laughed once. It was a terrible laugh, too high, too quick. I have no idea what she means. I looked at him. "You should try again." His face darkened. "Nora." Diane said, "This is inappropriate." "No," I said, "the loan packet was inappropriate. This is tableware." Mary's whispered, "Evan, who is Paige?" He said nothing. Then the doorbell rang. For 1 second, no one moved. Evan looked like he might be sick. I walked to the door. Paige Lurie stood on my porch. She was not what I expected, which made the whole thing worse. She was not cartoonish. She was not wearing anything scandalous. She was maybe 31, with dark hair pulled into a low knot, a cream sweater, and a leather portfolio under one arm. She looked nervous, then confused when she saw me. "Hi," she said. "I'm Paige. Evan said the investor dinner was here." Investor dinner. I turned slightly so she could see the dining room and her name card waiting. "Yes," I said, "we saved you a place." Behind me, Evan said, "Paige, this is not." She looked past me at him, at his mother, at the table. At the name card, her face changed. Maybe she knew then that the story he had told her and the story I had lived had collided in a room with good lighting. I stepped aside. "Come in." She did. That was the strangest dinner of my life. Not because people shouted. Nobody did at first. Shouting would have been easier. Shouting gives people permission to dismiss the truth as emotion. Silence makes them sit with what is on the table. Paige did not take the chair at first. She stood beside it, holding her portfolio like a shield. Glenn Harrow looked increasingly interested in being anywhere else. Diane stared at me with the slow fury of a woman whose son was being revealed before she could correct the framing. Mary's looked between Evan and Paige with real confusion, which told me she had been used as audience, not accomplice. Evan finally spoke. Paige is a consultant on the Grove Project. The Grove Project, I said. He grabbed onto that like a rope. Yes, a hospitality branding project. That is what this is. Nora has misunderstood a message. I looked at Paige. Did I misunderstand it? She swallowed. Evan said sharply, Paige. That one word told the whole table who he thought she answered to. Paige looked at him, then at me. I think I should go. I said, you can. But before you do, you should know he brought a lender to my house tonight to get my signature on a $178,000 equity line. Her eyes widened slightly. Diane cut in, Nora enough. No, I said, still looking at Paige. Did Evan tell you the loan was against our marital home? Paige's lips parted. He said it was his house. The room went still. My house, my down payment, my principal payments, his house. Glenn Harrow closed his folder halfway. Evan said, that is not what I meant. I smiled a little. Not because anything was funny. Because I had heard that sentence so many times in my marriage, it should have been engraved on our wedding rings. That is not what I meant. I opened the blue folder I had placed on the sideboard. Then let's use documents instead of meaning. Diane stood. I will not sit here while you humiliate my son. I looked at her. You sat here to help him pressure his wife into debt. She froze. Glenn cleared his throat. Perhaps this is not the best time to review financing. No, I said, it is the perfect time. Evan stepped toward me. Do not do this. I looked at him. Do what? Read. He looked at the folder like it was a weapon. Maybe it was. But not the kind he could claim was unfair. I placed the Redstone packet on the table. $178,000 proposed home equity line. Purpose listed as business expansion and property improvements. I did not apply. Glenn shifted. It was only preliminary. I know I can fear. Med with Redstone that no closing could occur without my in-person consent. Diane's eyes narrowed. You called the bank? Yes. She said it like I had committed treason. I placed the bank transfers next. Joint account transfers to Willow Street Holdings. $12,500, $8,000. Cashier's check request for $28,400. Paige, that company is yours, correct? Paige sat down slowly. Yes. Evan said those were business deposits. For a business I was told did not exist. I placed the credit card summary beside it. The Alder Room, Hotel, Florist, Women's Clothing, Ride Shares from Grove Avenue. $43,860 in charges over 9 months that did not go to our household. Mary's whispered, Evan. For once, her voice sounded like a sister, not a witness for the defense. Evan looked at Glenn. This is personal. Can you give us a minute? Glenn closed his folder fully. I think I should not be involved in personal collateral disputes. That sentence was dry enough to be funny in another life. Diane turned to him. Glenn, really? He stood. Diane, I was told both spouses were aligned. I looked at Evan. There is that word again, aligned. A useful word when someone has not been asked. Paige stood too. I did not know, she said. I wanted to hate her cleanly. It would have been easier. But her face had gone pale in a way that did not look rehearsed. You knew he was married, I said. She looked down. Yes. That was enough to know some things. She took that without defending herself. I'm sorry, she said. Evan laughed bitterly. Do not perform for her. Paige turned to him. You told me you were separated. Diane made a sound. Mary's closed her eyes. I looked at Evan. We sleep in the same bed. Paige's mouth tightened. He said it was for appearances until the financing was done. There it was, financing. The Mistress had been sold a version too. A better version for her, maybe, but still a version built around my signature. Evan said, "This is not helping." "No," I said, "it is clarifying." Diane lifted her chin. "Nora, marriages survive mistakes when wives do not turn them into trials." I turned to her then. For years, I had let Diane talk to me like I was a nervous clerk in the business of her son's greatness. Not that night. "Diane, a mistake is forgetting milk. Your son brought his girlfriend to my dining room to help me sign a loan on my house." Her face flushed. "Our house," Evan snapped. I looked at him. "Then you should have treated it like I lived there." The room went quiet. There are sentences that arrive before you know you believe them. That was one. I did not sign anything that night. Glenn left first, then Paige, then Maurice. Diane tried to stay, but Evan told her to go in a voice I had never heard from him before. It was not strength. It was panic looking for privacy. When the door finally closed, he and I stood in the dining room with 6 full plates, 1 empty chair, and a marriage that had become more document than promise. He said, "You embarrassed me." I said, "You involved witnesses. You enjoyed that." "No." "You set a place for her." "Yes, that was cruel." I looked at him across the table. "Cruel was making me cook dinner for the lender who was supposed to help you mortgage my ignorance." He flinched. "Good. Some sentences should land." He tried tenderness next. He sat down, put his head in his hands, and cried. Evan was beautiful when he cried. That sounds strange, but it was true. Some people cry in a way that invites you to become responsible for the wound they caused. "I got in too deep," he said. "I stayed standing. With Paige, with everything." "That is not an answer." He looked up. "I was trying to build something for us." "No, you were trying to build something that required me, not knowing who else was in the room." He wiped his face. "I love you." I believed that he believed it in that moment. That was not enough. The next morning, I filed for divorce. Not dramatically, not in anger. Through Claudia, with temporary orders requesting that no new debt be placed on the home, no major marital funds be transferred, and all business and personal financial records be preserved. The word preserved gave me strange comfort. Maybe because the marriage itself could not be preserved honestly anymore, but the truth could. Evan was served at his office on Wednesday afternoon. At 3:11, he called 12 times. I did not answer. Then Diane called, then Maurice, then a number I did not recognize that turned out to be Paige. I let them all go to voicemail. Evan texted, "You are making this public." I replied, "You made it financial." He wrote, "We need to talk like adults." I replied, "Adults use attorneys when one of them tries to borrow $178,000 against a lie." Then I stopped. That was one of the hardest disciplines of my life, letting the sentence be enough. The legal process did not unfold like a movie. There was no judge banging a gavel while everyone gasped. There were filings, deadlines, disclosures, account statements, temporary orders, and the slow humiliation of watching private foolishness become a spreadsheet. Claudia called the improper spending dissipation of marital assets. Such a clean phrase for hotel rooms, lies, flowers, and dinners I never attended. Evan's attorney tried to argue that many charges were business development expenses. That was when Paige became more important than anyone expected. 2 weeks after the dinner, she sent me an email through Claudia. It was not warm, it was not dramatic, it was a statement. She attached copies of lease drafts for a place called the Grove House, a boutique event and brand studio she and Evan had planned to open together. There were emails where Evan referred to me as financially conservative but manageable. There was a draft investor deck listing proposed funding sources. Private investor, Calder home equity, spouse bridge consent. Spouse bridge consent. That was what I had been reduced to in his future. Not wife, not partner, bridge consent. Paige wrote, "I am not asking forgiveness. I am providing what should not have been hidden." I read that sentence 3 times. Then I forwarded it to Claudia. The temporary hearing happened 6 weeks after the dinner in a small courtroom downtown. Not the big dramatic courtroom people imagine. A beige room with fluorescent lights, a clock that ticked too loudly, and a judge who looked like she had heard every excuse in Idaho before lunch. Evan sat on the other side with his attorney. Diane sat behind him in a navy dress, back straight, mouth tight. Maurice sat beside her, but she would not look at me. I wore a gray blazer and carried the blue folder even though Claudia had copies of everything. The hearing was about temporary financial orders, not final divorce. But sometimes temporary rooms reveal permanent truths. Evan's attorney said my reaction had been disproportionate. He said business funds and marital funds had become messy during a startup period. He said I had embarrassed Evan in front of a potential lender and business consultant. He said the marriage might have been saved if I had not turned a misunderstanding into litigation. The judge looked bored until Claudia stood. Claudia did not accuse like a television lawyer. She arranged. First, the loan packet. Then the bank note requiring my consent. Then the transfers to Willow Street Holdings. Then the credit card charges. Then the email from Paige with the investor deck. Then the text message I photographed from the lock screen. Tell her you're working late again. After tonight, we can stop hiding. Evan looked down when that one appeared. Diane looked away. Claudia said, "My client is not asking the court to resolve the divorce today. She is asking the court to prevent additional encumbrance, preserve the marital residence, and require transparency while the parties determine what funds were used for marital purposes and what funds were used to support a separate relationship and venture." The judge asked Evan one question. "Mr. Calder, did you tell Ms. Lurie you were separated?" Evan's attorney stood. "My client." The judge held up a hand. "I am asking because I have an exhibit where Ms. Lurie states that, and I have a loan request involving the marital home at the same time." Evan swallowed. "I said the marriage was ending." The judge looked at me. "Ms. Ellison, had your husband told you the marriage was ending?" "No, Your Honor." "Were you living together?" "Yes." "Sharing a bedroom?" "Yes." "Had you agreed to use home equity for his business?" "No." The judge turned back to Evan. "Then I suggest everyone in this room become very precise with language going forward." That sentence became one of my favorite things a stranger ever said. Very precise with language. A court order followed. No new debt on the house. No transfers outside normal living expenses. Evan had to provide business records. I had exclusive use of the home while the case proceeded because I could afford the mortgage, and Evan had already moved into a furnished apartment downtown, though he claimed it was temporary. Diane cornered me in the hallway after the hearing. No one cornered me physically. Diane was too polished for that. She simply stepped into my path with her purse over one arm and her grief arranged like jewelry. "You have destroyed him," she said. I looked at her. "Diane, your son is living in an apartment with a woman whose business got my renovation money." Her mouth trembled. "He is flawed, he is not evil." I did not call him evil. "You are treating him like a criminal." "I am treating him like an adult with bank statements." Her eyes hardened. "You were always waiting for him to fail." Hat one could have hurt if I had not been so tired. "No," I said. "I was waiting for him to tell the truth. I confused the two." Maurice heard that. She was standing a few feet away near the elevator, clutching her phone. When I walked past her, she said softly, "Nora." I stopped. She looked smaller than usual. Without Diane speaking through her, Maurice had a kind face. "I didn't know about Paige," she said. "I believe you." "I did know Mom wanted me there to pressure you." I waited. She looked at the floor. "I am sorry." It was not enough to change anything. It was enough to matter. "Thank you," I said. That evening, after the hearing, I went home and found Diane's casserole dish still in the back of my refrigerator. It was the one she had brought before the dinner, the one I had been too polite to throw away. The foil was tight over the top. Her name was written on masking tape in her perfect handwriting, as if even leftovers needed ownership. I stood there with the refrigerator door open and understood how many small things I had kept because returning them would require admitting what they represented. Casserole dishes, holiday napkins, Evan's dry cleaning tags, Diane's opinions, my own habit of making every uncomfortable thing comfortable enough for other people to keep using. I washed the dish, wrapped it in newspaper, and put it in a box by the door. Then I wrote Diane a short email. "Your dish is on the porch. Please arrange pickup without entering the house." She replied 9 minutes later. "How sad that this is who you have become." I looked at the sentence and felt nothing at first. Then, slowly, I felt relief. Because who I had become was a woman who could return the dish. The following week, Redstone Community Bank sent written confirmation that the proposed home equity line had been withdrawn. The letter was plain. No emotion, no apology, just a reference number, a date, and the sentence: "Application closed at borrower request due to lack of required spousal consent." I printed it and placed it in the blue folder. Lack of required spousal consent. That was another phrase that helped me. It said the quiet part without poetry. My consent had been required, not preferred, not nice to have, required. For years, Evan and Diane had treated my agreement like a personality test. If I agreed, I was loving. If I hesitated, I was fearful. If I refused, I was selfish. But the bank did not care whether my refusal was warm enough. The bank cared whether my name was on the form. Sometimes systems fail people. I know that. But sometimes one boring rule saves you from a room full of emotional pressure. A few days later, Paige sent one more document through Claudia. It was a copy of a text exchange with Evan from the week before the dinner. "Paige, does Nora know about the equity line?" "Evan, she knows we're exploring options." "Paige, that is not the same thing." "Evan, Nora needs the finished picture. If she sees the middle, she panics." "Paige, are you sure she will sign?" "Evan, my mother will be there. Nora hates looking difficult in front of people." I read that last line 3 times. Nora hates looking difficult in front of people. That was the trap in one sentence. Not the affair, not the debt, not the loan. The oldest trap. He knew I had been trained to preserve the mood. He knew I did not like making guests uncomfortable. He knew if he put enough eyes around me, there was a chance I would become polite before I became safe. I printed that message too. Not because Claudia needed it most, because I did. There are moments when betrayal becomes clearer than marriage ever was. You suddenly see that someone did not misunderstand your softness. They studied it. They mapped it. They built a plan around it. That realization made me furious. Then it made me free. At mediation, 3 months later, Evan tried one more version of the story. He sat across from me in a neutral office with beige chairs, a bowl of hard candy, and a retired magistrate who seemed allergic to nonsense. Evan looked thinner. His suit was too sharp for the sadness he was trying to perform. "I never meant to take anything from you," he said. I looked at him, then at the spreadsheet between us. "You wrote spouse bridge consent in an investor deck." He flinched. "That was business language." "No," I said. "That was how you saw me when you thought I would not read it." The mediator lowered his eyes to hide whatever expression crossed his face. Claudia did not move. She rarely gave me visible approval, but I felt it in the way she did not interrupt. Evan's attorney asked whether I would consider reimbursing Evan for certain business debts, because I had benefited from his entrepreneurial ambition during the marriage. Claudia looked at the attorney and said, "My client benefited from neither the hotel room nor the girlfriend's office lease." The mediator reached for a piece of candy. That became one of the few fun. Why memories from the divorce? Not loud funny, courtroom-adjacent funny. The kind of humor women find when they have been asked to be reasonable about unreasonable things for too long. The settlement talks lasted 9 hours. By the end, my back hurt, Evan's charm had collapsed into silence, and every person in the room understood that I was not going to trade the house for a cleaner version of his reputation. When we left, Claudia said, "You did not rush." I said I wanted to. "I know, but you did not." That mattered because rushing had been the atmosphere of my marriage. Hurry and trust me. Hurry and sign. Hurry and support. Hurry and forgive. Hurry and do not embarrass anyone. The divorce taught me that slow can be a boundary. The house changed after Evan left. At first, every room accused me. The dining room held the outline of that extra chair. The kitchen held the renovation plans we had taped inside a cabinet door. The bedroom held his empty side and the strange relief of not hearing him come home late and lie gently. I took down the framed photo from our wedding and placed it in a closet, not because I hated the woman in it, because she deserved rest. My mother came for 1 week. She did not say "I told you so" about Aunt Lenora's warning. She cleaned the fridge, made chicken soup, and folded laundry in the living room while I pretended not to cry in the pantry. My father fixed the loose porch railing and changed the locks. Not with drama, with a drill and the calm fury of a man who had loved me longer than Evan had known how to perform it. One night, my mother found me sitting at the dining table, staring at the place where Paige's name card had been. "You know," she said, "setting that place was something." I am not sure it was wise. It was honest. I looked at her. She sat across from me. Sometimes honest looks dramatic to people who built a life around pretending. I kept that sentence. The divorce took 11 months. 11 months of requests for production, statements, valuations, mediated proposals, and Evan alternating between apology and blame. He would send emails through attorneys saying he took responsibility, then personal texts saying I had humiliated him beyond repair. Claudia told me not to respond. I learned to screenshot and breathe. The final accounting showed $126,700 of marital funds spent on non-marital purposes tied to Paige, Grove Avenue, and Evan's separate business venture. Not all of it was recoverable dollar for dollar. Law is not moral math, but enough of it mattered. I kept the house. That was not guaranteed. We negotiated. My down payment inheritance was recognized. The dissipation affected the settlement. Evan received less from the equity than he expected, and I refinanced the remaining mortgage in my name alone after selling my car and delaying the kitchen renovation another 2 years. The renovation fund was not $93,400 anymore. It was much smaller. That hurt. Money is never just money after betrayal. It is hours, choices, discipline, groceries not upgraded, vacations not taken, shoes worn one more season. The future you saved for converted into someone else's secret. I grieved the kitchen almost as much as the marriage some days. That may sound shallow. It was not. The kitchen was the room I had been building in my mind while Evan built a second life downtown. Losing that timeline felt like losing proof that carefulness protects you. But carefulness had protected me, not from pain, from losing everything. Because I had records, I kept the house. Because I called the bank, the HELOC never closed. Because I did not sign to keep the peace, peace eventually became possible without him. Evan and Paige did not last. People always ask that, though it matters less than they think. The relationship collapsed after the funding disappeared, and the legal disclosures made romance feel like liability. The Grove house never opened. Paige moved to Bend and rebranded herself as a creative director for Honest Spaces. I laughed when I saw that, then closed the tab. Evan tried to come back once. Not with flowers, not even with a speech. He showed up on a rainy Thursday, holding an envelope with final tax documents, and stood on the porch he had once called too modest. I did not invite him in. He looked past me into the house. "You changed the curtains. Yes, they look good. Thank you," he shifted. "I miss this place." I looked at him. "You miss the payment schedule more than the place when you lived here." He winced. "I deserve that. You do." Rain gathered on his jacket shoulders. "I was selfish," he said. "Yes, and stupid. Yes, and cruel." I paused. "Yes." His eyes filled. "I loved you, Nora, I know." That was the sad part. He had loved me in the way some people love a house while drilling holes in the foundation, with affection, with NT. Tea lemon without maintenance. He looked toward the dining room window. Do you ever think about that dinner? Sometimes. I hated you for setting that place. I know. Now I think maybe it was the first time someone put the truth where I could not step around it. I did not answer. Not because it was wrong. Because some insights arrived too late to be rewarded. He handed me the envelope and left. I watched him walk down the porch steps carefully, like a guest who knew he no longer had permission to use his own key. The following spring, I restarted the kitchen renovation. Smaller, slower, mine. I could not afford the whole plan at once. The custom cabinets had to wait. The pantry shelves were done by my father and a neighbor who accepted payment in cash and pie. I kept the old floors because they were still solid. I painted the walls a warm white, replaced the sink, and bought the long table I had wanted with money from a bonus at work. The first dinner I hosted at that table was not fancy. Soup, bread, salad. Lemon tart because I still liked it, no matter what Diane had done to the memory. My parents came, my friend Sella from work came. Mari's came too, which surprised me. She had reached out months earlier, slowly, carefully, without asking me to forgive Evan or explain Diane. She told me she had started therapy because she realized she had spent her whole life translating her mother's control into family loyalty. That sounded like a real beginning, not a performance, so I allowed coffee. Then another. Then dinner. Diane was not invited. Not because I wanted revenge. Because a home needs doors that mean something. Before we ate, Sella lifted her glass and said, "To Nora's table." I looked at the chairs. Every place set for someone who knew why they were there. No hidden lender. No secret business partner. No mother-in-law staging pressure as concern. No girlfriend receiving a name card because my husband's phone had finally told me what his mouth would not. Just people, food, light. A house with its debt in one name and its truth in the open. I thought I might cry, but instead I laughed. My mother asked what was funny. I said, I finally understand why place settings matter. They are not just plates and forks, they are invitations. They say who belongs in the room. For years, Evan had tried to keep me in the marriage while moving the truth somewhere else. He wanted me at the table for dinner, at the bank for signatures, at home for stability, but not in the facts. He wanted my trust without earning it, my money without explaining it, my signature without respecting the person attached to it. So I set a place for Paige. People sometimes think that was the moment I exposed her. It was not. It was the moment I stopped letting him keep his rooms separate. The wife in one room. The girlfriend in another. The lender in one folder. The hotel charges in another. The dream in his mouth. The debt in my name. I put one chair at one table and let everyone see who had been dining on my silence. That is my story. If your husband's phone ever told you more truth than his mouth, what would you have done? Would you confront him, call a lawyer, or set one more place at the table and let him explain who it was for? Share this with someone who needs permission to read the records before signing for love. Before you go, tell me your name and the city you're watching from. I want to know where this story found you. I will see you in the next one.